Hello, my name's Peter and I'm the Dungeon Doctor. If you're new here, welcome. This is my latest video in my Monk Masterclass series, where I look at how to get the most out of every single Monk subclass in D&D 5e. So far I've already covered half of the Monk subclasses currently available in the game, so I'm actually really interested in what you all want me to cover next. We have the following subclasses there: the Way of Shadow, the Way of Open Hand, the Kensei Monk, the Way of the Astral Self, the Way of the Ascendant Dragon, and the Way of Mercy. So let me know in the comments below if you want me to cover any one of these particular subclasses. And if you can leave this video a cheeky little like and a subscribe, that would be peachy. This time, however, we have another build which is going to make the most out of the Way of Long Death Monk. If you want to hear my full review for this subclass and see how we can use it to make a vampire, then check out this video up here, I think. The build we're going to cover today is going to be just as terrifying as that one, but it's also going to be furrier. If vampires represent our fear of death, then werewolves represent our fear of the human id, of losing ourselves to our animal instincts. And while people fear those infected with the curse of lycanthropy, there's equally a fascination with it, of being able to take on an alternative form, one which is free from our usual identities. Which is probably why werewolves are so common a Halloween costume, among other reasons. Okay, fine, let's address the anthropomorphized elephant in the room. D&D and other role-playing games are often used as a safe place for people to explore their sexual and gender identities among peers. This is a wonderful aspect of these games and is something to be celebrated. Similarly, people in the furry community roleplay as anthropomorphized animals as a way of trying out different identities. So it's inevitable many players from this community would seek to bring their furry personas or fursonas into a game like D&D. And this shouldn't be an issue, since we've already established that exploring identity through roleplay games is a wonderful thing. However, the furry community does have a reputation for being a very open and sex-positive environment, and this can sometimes lead to friction in group role-playing games like D&D, where the other players maybe don't share those same expectations. And I believe it's that which has led to a number of RPG horror stories. When these expectations for the game don't match up, it will often give the furry community a bad reputation for, well, how they engage with the game. Whether these horror stories are true or not, we shouldn't judge a whole group based on the worst examples. And as with all social problems in D&D, the issue is generally not with the players themselves, but with poor communication and poor management of expectations. Conversations around how we utilise sexual content in RPGs can be awkward, but believe me, it is much less awkward than having to unpick the social messages poor management of expectations can cause. Just sort it out in session 0, please. Now, with that all out of the way, let's make some furries very happy. No, wait! Lycanthropy is a well-known mechanic in the game of D&D, and many players see this as a way to portray this fantasy of being a furry. The way it works is if you're bitten by a were creature, such as a werewolf or a werebear, etc., you gain the lycanthropy curse. Unfortunately, this curse in the game's mechanics is problematic. Among other benefits, it essentially grants the player immunity to all non-magical damage, which I think we can all agree is not a tool DMs should give to players lightly, as it completely unbalances the game. Thankfully, an optimized build using the Way of Long Death Monk provides another means for achieving the fantasy of being a lycanthrope without the need for game-breaking mechanics. So, let's look at how we can achieve this with the Way of the Furry. For our race, there are no specific feats we need to make this build work, so we needn't go with variant human or custom lineage. That being said, I do really like one of a few feats on this build, so I'll be presenting this build as a variant human or custom lineage race, but just know we could easily pick one of the other races represented in something like Morden Kanan's Monsters of the Multiverse, as each of these races grants a +1 in 3 different ability scores. A race like Harangon, for example, would be great, as the boost to initiative could help us move before allies in combat, so we better position ourselves for using the Way of Long Death Monk's Hour of Reaping feature. For our starting feat, we might choose to pick up Fey Touched, Just like the vampire build, we can use this to gain the heroism spell, which we can use to protect an ally from our Hour of Reaping feature. Alternatively, Skill Expert can give us a +1 in one of our ability scores and expertise in athletics. This build can potentially get a lot out of grappling enemies, so it's a very strong pick. If we don't pick it up now, we'd certainly want to pick it up at some point in our character's career. However, the feat I'm going to pick is Piercer. Piercer has two effects. Firstly, it lets us reroll one of our damage dice when we cause piercing damage, and secondly, on a critical hit, we get to roll an additional damage dice in addition to our usual damage. Also, it's a half feat, allowing us to put a +1 in strength or dexterity. In our case, we'd probably put it into strength. These features are both going to help us squeeze more damage out of this build, and we'll talk more about how later. I'm going to assume we've chosen Variant Human and picked the Piercer feat, but no matter our choice, we should be able to pick up the following ability scores using the point buy method. Strength of 13, which we'll add a +1 to from our half feat. We'll also have Dexterity of 14. We'll have a Constitution of 13, which we'll put one of our +1s from our human race into. We'll have a Wisdom of 15, which again we'll put a +1 from our human race into. We will be dumping Charisma in this case, putting an 8 in that. And we have one floating point left over, so we'll put that in Intelligence to give us an Intelligence of 9. For our background skills, on this build, if we haven't already picked it up, we should definitely grab the Athletics skill from our background or race. Also, stealth proficiency, as we won't be wearing armour, so we may as well get the most out of our stealth abilities. Level 1, Druid 1. For our starting class, we will be taking a Druid level. As a lycanthrope, we're going to be very in touch with nature. Druid will grant us 2 skills from a predefined list, but to lean into our predator flavour more, I'd choose survival and perception. It's also going to give us proficiency with light and medium armour and shields. We won't be using these proficiencies for too long, so let's just go with light armour and shield. Using studded leather and a shield at level 1 would give us an armour class of 16. We also gain spell casting. For our cantrips, we really need both Shillelagh and Produce Flame. Shillelagh will allow us to use our wisdom stat for attacks with a quarterstaff, letting us focus more on our wisdom as we level up. Meanwhile, Produce Flame gives us a way to see in the dark. As a human, we won't have dark vision, and we also won't necessarily have dark vision depending on what animal we transform into. So this will come in handy later. For first level spells, we can prepare a number of spells equal to our Druid level plus our Wisdom ability modifier. Spells like Entangle, Absorb Elements and Healing Words are all great picks, but I specifically want to take an often overlooked spell that actually works fantastically on this build. Jump. When we cast the spell, our jump distance is tripled. We actually have a great strength score of 14, so our usual long jump distance is 14 feet and our high jump is 5 feet. If we cast jump, this would then increase to 42 feet and 15 feet respectively. Our jump distance is limited to our movement though, so we might need to dash to get the most out of our long jump. But this is a fantastic spell to get around a lot of low level obstacles and it has great synergy on this build. Level 2, Druid 2. Of course, the reason we wanted to go for Druid 2 was to pick up the Moon Druid subclass. This allows us to transform into a CR1 beast twice per short rest. We can do this as a bonus action and it lasts for a number of hours equal to half our Druid level, which would be 1 hour currently. Or until our beast form drops to 0 hit points. This might not sound long, however 2 transformations per short rest and each lasting an hour means we should be able to remain in this form for most combats. Crucially, our beast form has both the attributes of the beast we wild shape into and the features of our character, except for special senses like dark vision. This is why it was really important to pick up Produce Flame at level 1, as this does give us something that we can carry over to our wild shape to see in the dark with. We'll talk about how class features will interact with our wild shape as we level up, but just note, this is a very complicated topic, so you may need to have a long conversation with your DM about what will or will not work on this character. Or you could just direct them towards this video. I'm going to be taking a very even-handed approach on this build, as I will only be suggesting what I think will work at most tables. Now, for our wild shape options. There are a lot of good options for a beast we can transform into. Brown Bear is possibly the most powerful option initially. It has great hit points and multi-attack, allowing it to deal a lot of damage at this level. Giant Spider is also a great one with tons of utility thanks to Spider Climb and its web effect, and it's certainly got a unique aesthetic. I would also give a shout out to Lion and Giant Hyena, who each have a bonus action attack. Whatever creature we choose, there's a lot of scope for reflavouring the creature to something closer to the fantasy we want to fulfill, and there's no reason why we couldn't be a lycanthrope whose curse allows them to take on one of many different forms. But the beast I'm going to assume we're using most of the time is the direwolf. So let's take a look at the direwolf. Did you know that 25% of fursonas are actually related to wolves? Just a random fact to put out there. Firstly, it has a decent armor class of 14, thanks to its +2 dex and natural armor. We're going to be able to improve on this when we take monk levels. Next, the hit points are really great and are going to be better than what we can achieve ourselves for some time. The 50-foot movement speed is also fantastic, and again, we can build on this with our monk class's mobility buffs. But let's talk about the proficiency bonuses and how these will work in wild shape. The direwolf has good proficiencies, with a +4 in stealth and a +3 in perception. However, we will be able to use our own proficiency bonuses when making checks for skills we're already proficient in. Also, we should note that our wisdom, intelligence and charisma scores are equal to our characters while we're wild shaped. So for example, if we made a perception check in this form, we would get a +3 from our wisdom score and a +2 from our proficiency bonus. When our proficiency bonus increases at level 5, we would instead add a proficiency bonus of +3 to our check, because according to Jeremy Crawford, we always choose the higher bonus for skill checks and saving throws. If we have proficiency in a skill which the direwolf doesn't have, we'd also be able to add this to our skill checks for the wolf. So for an athletics check, we'd add our +2 proficiency bonus to the wild shape strength. For a direwolf, this would be a +3. If we add expertise, thanks to the skill expert feat, we'd add our proficiency bonus twice, giving us an athletics check modifier of +7. Similarly, we'd be able to use our saving throw proficiencies while in wild shape, which for a druid would be our intelligence and wisdom saving throws. Let's continue looking at the other features our direwolf gets. We get keen senses, so if we're making a perception check while relying on our hearing or sense of smell, we'd have advantage. Because we'll have great wisdom, our perception checks are going to be fantastic. We'd also gain pack tactics, which is fantastic as it gives us advantage while an ally is within 5 feet of an enemy that we're attacking. This is something we can expect to happen reasonably often in play, and is going to be very important for maintaining our accuracy as we get into high levels of play. And for our attack, we gain a bite attack. It does great damage with 2d6 +3, which is as good as making an attack with a greatsword, and the attack deals piercing damage, so the Piercer feat we picked up from Variant Human will apply. Because we're rolling multiple damage dice, we can re-roll one of these using this feat. But this also means we have better odds of getting a 1 or 2 on that roll, which means we can potentially improve our damage by something of the order of 1.5 damage per round. Our critical damage, meanwhile, will be 5d6 +3, thanks to Piercer, and because of pack tactics giving us advantage, we've got reasonable odds of getting a critical hit. This means we have the potential to hit enemies pretty hard. Lastly, when we hit a creature with our bite attack, they need to make a DC 13 strength saving throw or be knocked prone. There's no size limitation on this, by the way. I think this was unintentional on the part of the game's designers, so a reasonable DM might rule creatures 2 sizes larger than us aren't affected. Speaking of which, our size is large, so we can grapple, shove or trip huge or smaller creatures. If we picked Skill Expert as a feat, then we'd be a fantastic grappler thanks to a +4 from our proficiency bonus and a +3 from our direwolf's strength modifier. It does raise the question of how we're maintaining a grapple. It might be we have to use our teeth for this, in which case we could be limited to just biting that creature. Again, a conversation to have with your DM. Because of all this, I really think direwolf is probably going to be our default choice for wild shape throughout our career. Also, this video would be very long if I considered every option available to us. Lastly, we can spend a spell slot as a bonus action to heal a d8 of hit points. It's a nice option to have, but I think we're better off keeping a few spell slots just for utility casting. Level 3, Druid 2, Monk 1. Now that we have our wild shape form, we'll be focusing on just our monk levels for most of our career. The progression is simple. But there's a lot to consider in how our features will combine with Wild Shape, so it's worth looking at each level in some detail. Firstly, from Monk we gain Unarmoured Defense. The consensus in the D&D community is that this will work with Wild Shape. Consequently, this will increase our Wolf's armor class from 14 to 15. A small but nice improvement. We also gain Martial Arts. Rules as written, this won't work with our Bite attack, as that requires that we make an attack using either an unarmed strike or a monk weapon. A bite is neither of these, but some DMs may rule differently on this. What we can do though is make an unarmed strike with our attack action, and then use martial arts. Note that Jeremy Crawford has clarified that all creatures can make an unarmed strike, so it should be okay at most tables. However, while we've established that proficiency bonus carries over for skills and saving throws, it's actually really unclear whether we would use our proficiency bonus for an unarmed strike or not. Either we would use the beast attack bonus to determine whether we can make a hit or not, or we would use our proficiency bonus plus the beast's strength or dexterity. The rules simply do not specify which we should use. Personally, as a DM, I would rule we would use our character's proficiency bonus for an unarmed strike, as our training as a monk is a part of our character, especially when it's used as part of our martial arts feature. Meanwhile, the bite attack is a trait we gain from the beast, so that will use its proficiency bonus. The worst case scenario is that we use the beast's proficiency bonus for any and all attacks it makes, so we should assume this unless our DM says otherwise. Thankfully, pack tactics and other features we gain as we level up can help us get around this issue of a low attack bonus. In either case, we can now either make a single bite attack or 2 unarmed strikes on our turn. And for our unarmed strikes, we would opt to use the direwolf's strength rather than their dexterity, so we'd have a +5 to those attack rolls. In our human form, we should probably stop wearing armor entirely. It'll reduce our armor class by 1 point, but at least we'll be able to use all our other features as normal. And we'll mostly be relying on our wolf form for combat, so it's just not going to be worth taking our armor on and off. Level 4. Druid 2, Monk 2. First, we gain unarmoured movement, so our movement speed as a wolf is now 60 feet, which is very fast at this level. We also gain Ki. Step of the Wind can help us go even further, so we can cover 120 foot in one round, or 180 feet if we use our bonus action and action to dash. Additionally, when we use Step of the Wind, our jump distance is doubled. As a direwolf, we have a strength of 17, so ordinarily we'd have a long jump distance of 17 feet and a high jump distance of 6 feet. With Step of the Wind, this will be 34 feet and 12 feet respectively, which is enough to leap over a lot of medium and large creatures without too much issue, letting us move around the battlefield more easily. However, if we have also cast Jump on ourselves before wild shaping, then we could have a total multiplier of 6 when we use Step of the Wind. This means we could have a long jump distance of 102 feet and a vertical jump distance of 36 feet. At this point, we have effectively given ourselves a limited form of flight. This helps us solve a lot of exploration problems, but it also gives us an interesting option to deal with flying creatures. If we jump at them and use our bite attack, we can potentially knock them prone with the secondary effect. This will knock them out of the sky, dealing extra bludgeoning damage and bringing them into melee range of our allies. I really love the idea of us being this apex predator from whom even flying creatures can't escape. Not only is this just a cool visual which matches up with the common idea of werewolves leaping massive distances and being incredibly strong, but it addresses a weakness of using Wild Shape in that they lack ranged attack options. Normally our mobility will solve this issue, but being able to jump great distances can allow us to reach creatures who are otherwise out of reach. We can also spend a key point for patient defense. With our decent armor class and high hit points, this can help make us a very tanky frontliner. We can also spend a key point on Flurry of Blows. The direwolf can take the attack action to use its bite attack. Because of this, we are able to follow up a single bite attack with 2 unarmed strikes. This is great because potentially we'll just have knocked an enemy prone with the bite attack and will then have advantage on the follow-up unarmed strikes, potentially allowing us to deal a lot of damage at once. Lastly, if we're using optional class features from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we gain the dedicated weapon feature. It's possible some DMs will allow you to choose your bite attack as a dedicated weapon, even though it's not considered either a simple or martial weapon. If so, this will make life a bit easier managing our wild shape features, but it's not a big deal if we can't use it. Level 5. Druid 2, Monk 3. At Monk 3 we gain our subclass, the Way of Long Death, and with it the Touch of Death feature. As a reminder, the Touch of Death feature will give us our Wisdom modifier plus our Monk level in extra temporary hit points whenever we reduce a creature within 5 feet of us to 0 hit points. Currently, this will give us 6 temporary hit points. Because we've been investing heavily into damage dealing, having a strong bite attack which deals decent damage, and we have the hit points to stay in melee consistently, I feel it's safe to say we have good odds of benefiting from this feature frequently throughout the adventuring day. Crucially though, gaining these temporary hit points in battle will allow us to stay in wild shape longer, as we'll drop out of it whenever we reach 0 hit points. This means our werewolf is more driven to kill than they would be otherwise, which is great from a flavour standpoint and creates an interesting challenge for us in combat, as we can allow our character's bloodlust to guide their actions. There's another way we can potentially trigger this feature outside of combat. In Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, an optional feature for druids called Wild Companion was introduced. With it, we could cast the Find Familiar spell without material components. Using this, we can potentially summon and then devour a familiar to gain those temporary hit points. It's a bit of a niche strategy, but something worth keeping in mind if the opportunity arises. Lastly, from Monk 3 we gain the Deflect Missiles feature. By my reading of the feature, I believe we should be able to use the damage reduction portion of this feature at most tables. However, the part where a monk can grasp an arrow and then throw it at an enemy with free hand probably won't be allowed. Although I could see some DMs allowing you to grab the missile with your wolf's teeth and throw it that way, so again, have a conversation. Level 6, Druid 2, Monk 4. We finally gain an ability score increase. With this we'll increase our wisdom. This will increase our armor class in both forms and increase the temporary hit points we gain from Touch of Death to 8. The increase in armor class and temporary hit points will help to keep our direwolf's tankiness relevant as we increase in level. The increase in wisdom also boosts our druid spell casting, so spells like Entangle will get a welcome boost too. And our attack bonus from Shillelagh increases, giving us a solid attack bonus when we're in humanoid form. We also gain Slowfall, which depending on the table can help mitigate the damage we might take from our frankly ludicrous jump distances. Level 7, Druid 2, Monk 5. We gain extra attack and Stunning Strike. We can trigger Stunning Strike with any melee weapon attack, so when we bite a creature in wolf form, we can attempt to stun them. Our DC for this is pretty good thanks to us focusing on wisdom, and advantage from either the prone condition or pack tactics makes our accuracy reasonably reliable. It's also possible we can impose the stunned condition before a creature needs to make a strength save against our bite attack. If they're stunned before making that saving throw, then they will automatically fail it and be knocked prone. This is fantastic, as while the DC on the knocked prone effect doesn't scale for us, our Stunning Strike does, so this feature can remain relevant at high levels of play. Alternatively, if we've stunned a creature and we're in our human form, we can follow up with Entangle on our next turn. Again, stunned creatures automatically fail their strength and dexterity saving throws, so they'll be automatically restrained. With extra attack, the general consensus I could find was that you could use this feature to make up to 2 attacks in wild shape. However, you cannot use it to, for example, use the multi-attack feature of the brown bear twice, as this is a unique action and not an attack. Because of this, we can now make up to 2 bite attacks around with our direwolf. This means the direwolf now completely outclasses the brown bear for damage. Not only this, if we knock a creature prone with the first attack, we might want to consider following it up with a grapple using our remaining attack. This is why picking up the Skill Expert feat at level 1 was so tempting. Because we're now making 2 attacks around, both likely with advantage, our chances to get a critical hit have also increased, improving our chances to trigger the extra powerful attacks we gain from having the Piercer feat. Also, if we're using Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, we gain the Focused Aim feature. With this, we can expend ki to add a +2 modifier to an attack roll for every key point we spend. This can really help make up for the low accuracy of the wolf's bite attacks, especially when we're dealing with high armor class enemies. Also, if we spend a key point when we're making an attack, either from Focused Aim or Stunning Strike, and if we're using the Key Field Attack feature from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it means that we can then use our bonus action to make an unarmed strike or a attack with a monk weapon as a bonus action, irrespective of if we made an attack with a monk weapon or not. If you have a lenient DM that's ruled a bite can be your dedicated weapon, this could potentially allow you to make up to 3 bite attacks a round. If not, we at least gain an additional unarmed strike from this feature. Level 8, Druid 2, Monk 6. Gain key empowered strikes and our subclass feature Hour of Reaping. If key empowered strikes, all our unarmed strikes are considered magical. Some DMs may rule this can extend to your bite attacks as well, but I could see this being ruled either way. If you find monsters are resistant to your bite attacks, you can at least swap to using unarmed strikes instead. Alternatively, you may be able to convince a DM to give you the magic item Insignia of Claws from the Tyranny of Dragons module. This magic item will make all of your bite and claw attacks as a wild-shaped creature magical. I feel like most reasonable DMs won't want to completely nerf a character if the other marshals are gaining magic weapons, so I feel pretty safe in saying that this will be an option at some point. With Hour of Reaping meanwhile, we're going to be able to make use of our ludicrous speed. At level 6, our movement speed as a wolf is now 65 feet. So it's entirely possible in a lot of combats we can use our amazing mobility to position ourselves away from allies when we use the Hour of Reaping feature. In fact, we probably have enough mobility that we can move to a safe place to use this feature and then still move ourselves to somewhere strategically important. And if we still need more mobility to get the most out of this feature, Step of the Wind will increase both our jump distance and movement speed, so I feel pretty safe in saying we're going to get a lot out of this feature. One difficulty we have with this build, unlike the vampire build, is that the wolf doesn't have dark vision, so in dark environments we will need light to see. If we casted Produce Flame before going into Wild Shape, then we will probably still be able to maintain the light that cantrip gives us, giving us some illumination when we're in Wild Shape. However, having this illumination does mean we can't make good use of the dark to prevent our allies from seeing us. Once we've frightened a creature, we should note that they'll have disadvantage on all their ability checks until the end of our next turn. Because of this, on a follow-up turn, we could attempt to knock them prone with a shove action and then grapple them. With them having disadvantage on their ability checks, and us having a high strength and proficiency in athletics checks, we've got great odds on succeeding on this. And we might not even need to use our first attack for a shove, instead relying on our bite attack to knock a creature prone before then going in for the grapple. Alternatively, if we've successfully used Entangle on a creature, we might consider using Hour of Reaping on the following turns, as the frightened condition will give them disadvantage on checks to end that restrained condition. Level 9, Druid 2, Monk 7. We're going to continue with Monk as this gives us more defensive features and more ki to use with Stunning Strike or Focused Aim. I'm also very keen to get the Mastery of Death feature on this build for reasons that will soon become apparent. We gain Evasion and Stillness of Mind. Evasion is very welcome for helping us shake off damage from dexterity saving throws, and while Stillness of Mind is welcome, however, because we started as a druid, we'll have excellent wisdom saving throws already, so it may or may not be useful to us. Level 10, Druid 2, Monk 8. Not much to add here, we'll gain another +2 to wisdom to max out our wisdom to 20. With this, the armor class of our wolf now increases to 17. And the overall temporary hit points we gain from Hour of Reaping will be 13. It's worth noting that our hit points as a wolf are definitely falling behind what players typically have at this level. The temporary hit points help make up for this, especially if we're able to get a kill here or there in combat. But I think whereas in the early game where we were relying on our bulk to take hits, at this point in the game we'll be relying more and more on our control effects, such as Hour of Reaping, Stunning Strike, Grappling, or knocking creatures prone with our bite attack, or using Entangle while we're in human form. Because we've maxed out our wisdom though, our DC on most of these effects is going to be really good. However, at higher levels we will be able to return to tanking. Level 11, Druid 2, Monk 9. We now gain the ability to run along walls and across surfaces such as water. The wolf is incredibly mobile, and as before with our Drunken Master build, we might want to consider dragging enemies along with us and dropping them from great heights or into water where the opportunity arises. Level 12, Druid 2, Monk 10. At Monk 10 we gain the somewhat ironic ability Purity of Body. We are now immune to all disease and poison. I think we'll want to make an exception for lycanthropy though. Our movement speed as a direwolf also increases to 70 foot. Not that we'll have needed much more movement at this stage. Now, normally I would end these builds at level 12. However, I needed to make a very special exception for this build. So, ending on unlucky 13. Level 13, Druid 2, Monk 11. With this, we finally gain the subclass feature Mastery of Death. As a reminder, the feature states when we drop to 0 hit points, we can spend 1 key point to instead be reduced to just 1 hit point. This is a fantastic feature, however a big problem with it is what happens when you run out of key. Suddenly your monk can be in a very bad situation with no key or hit points, so it can be a high risk strategy to use this ability to act as a tank. But this is where the way of the furry really shines. The feature stipulates when we are reduced to 0 hit points. When we're in wild shape, our hit points are those of the wild shape. Because of this, when our wild shape is reduced to 0 hit points, we can trigger our Mastery of Death feature. This is great because now we can use Mastery of Death to maintain our wild shape for longer. This makes up for the fact that our wolf's hit points have been lagging behind the rest of the party. Not only this, when we run out of key or decide we'd rather hang on to that resource, instead of falling unconscious, we can simply revert to human form with our original hit point pool completely intact. This allows us to really fulfill the fantasy of the impossibly resilient wolf creature and return to filling the role of the party tank. Even better, both our key points and wild shapes are tied to a short rest, so we can repeat this trick consistently throughout the adventuring day. So where do we go after level 13? We're just one level off gaining another ability score increase, so I think we should redo that. We've already maxed out our wisdom modifier, and improving other ability scores won't help our direwolf form. Because of this, I think this would be a really good time to pick up another feat. I really like the Sentinel feat. This allows us to attack a creature within 5 foot of us when they target a nearby ally with an attack. There are two great things about this for us. Firstly, if we use this to make a bite attack against a creature, we can potentially knock them prone during their own turn, and depending on their movement speed and what they've done that turn, it may mean they can't get up until their following turn. Not only this, it gives us the opportunity to kill creatures outside of our own turn. This means we can potentially regenerate our temporary hit points multiple times per round, greatly improving the benefits we gain from our Touch of Death feature. Something I haven't mentioned up to this point. I think up to now it's been very tempting to possibly allow other creatures to use our direwolf form as a mount in combat. This way we can help them benefit from our mobility, and if we then pick up the Sentinel feat later, it means that we can use attacks against them to trigger our own response. However, I think this is going to lead into a lot of inappropriate comments about people mounting our furry, or, having a bit of a rough ride in that combat. I'll stop now. Alternatively, we could pick up the Skill Expert feat if we haven't already, to give ourselves expertise in athletics. Using that feat, we can put the floating +1 modifier into our intelligence, which will round up to 10. With that feat, we'll then always have the option to instead focus on grappling and controlling creatures instead of damage dealing. At this level, our proficiency bonus is a +5, so we'll have a +13 to such checks while we're in wild shape. And we can grapple huge creatures as a direwolf, so this should stay a reasonably relevant strategy in even high levels of play. And because we can remain as a direwolf using Mastery of Death, we can hold these grapples for potentially a very long time. After this, there's been a class tip I've been putting off for far too long with this build. Barbarian. When we rage as a barbarian, we would gain an extra 2 damage to all of our strength-based attacks as a wolf, which would apply to both our unarmed strikes and our bite attacks. This helps make the wolf's damage more relevant at these higher levels. The resistance to physical damage also makes our temporary and wild shape hit points go much further. And while we're raging, we gain advantage to our strength checks, so grappling and shoving will be super easy for us. After this though, I don't see us gaining much else from Barbarian. We don't gain anything out of Reckless Attack, as we already have so many other ways to gain advantage. Because of this, I'd probably take more monk levels, so we can pick up Diamond Soul by level 17. Diamond Soul gives us proficiency in all saving throws, which will also benefit our wild shape. After this, we have 3 more monk levels left until we hit level 20, so let's end at monk 17. This will give us the Long Death Monk's Touch of the Long Death feature. As I stated in the vampire build, it is an expensive feature, but since we've maxed out our wisdom score, it could be useful if we have the key points to spare and we really need reliable damage on a creature. Our Touch of Death feature will also at this point give us 22 temporary hit points every time we destroy a creature, so our direwolf should be able to take at least a couple of hits before we lose wild shape or need to rely on Mastery of Death to maintain the wild shape. Of course, if we're in a rage, our wild shape should also last much longer. Also, if we take Monk to 17, we'd have gained another ability score increase during that time. It's difficult to choose anything in particular here, however I'd consider maybe taking Crusher. Crusher will give us another +1 to either Constitution or Strength, but the main thing that we get out of it is the ability to push creatures around a bit using our unarmed strikes, and also gives us something else that happens when we get a critical hit, this time triggered off bludgeoning damage. When we hit a creature with bludgeoning damage and get a critical hit, Crusher will put them into a stun-like effect, where all further attacks until the start of our next turn will have advantage against that creature. Alternatively, we might want to pick up something like Tough, so that our ordinary hit points as a human are much stronger. We should note that while we've mainly focused on the direwolf form, our human form is no slouch. With Shillelagh, they have great to hit modifiers and can still maintain other features like Hour of Reaping. Because of this, what we end with is a character who is very, very tanky and has lots of great control effects through both Hour of Reaping and grappling. We also have a crazy amount of mobility, potentially topping out at 75 movement speed. This all combines to create a terrifying predator who can easily chase down their prey, paralyze them with fear, pin them down, and potentially devour them. Absolutely chilling. Well, that has been the way of the furry. I really hope you all enjoyed it. I really love how this build came out, and as I said at the beginning of the video, I'm really interested to hear what subclasses you'd like me to cover next, so please let me know in the comments below, and otherwise I'll see you next time.